Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. Today I will be presenting some analysis of the 1980 Rendlesham Forest UFO case. I will give a very brief summary for those who are not familiar. The events occurred in the UK just outside the twin US air bases known as Bentwaters and Woodbridge. In the early hours of the 26th of December 1980, a group of 3 airmen were sent out to investigate something in the forest, about 300 yards outside the perimeter of Woodbridge Base. Sergeant James Penniston was one of the 3 men sent out to investigate. He claims he witnessed a small triangular craft on the forest floor of unknown origin. He claims it took off and disappeared without noise and departed in the blink of an eye. 2 nights later, the Deputy Base Commander, Colonel Charles Holt, went out with a team into the same forest to investigate more unusual lights that were being witnessed. He claims that he and his team witnessed unusual lights, moving in strange formation and with unconventional dynamics. Another witness, Larry Warren, has claimed that on the night Holt visited the forest, a craft landed and 3 aliens were witnessed with multiple airmen. Holt does not agree that this happened. A great deal of controversy surrounds this case. Witness accounts do not match up, and there have been many crossed words between various parties who support one witness or another. In order to get closer to the truth about this very murky case, I have had statement analysis carried out on 3 key witnesses. They are Jim Penniston, Charles Holt, and Larry Warren. I have also had analysis carried out on Larry Warren's co-author, Peter Robbins. The analysis represents the opinions of Peter Hyatt, who was well respected in his field. Please note that the analysis videos are quite lengthy. Larry Warren and Charles Holt's analysis are about an hour long each. Penniston and Robbins are about half an hour each. I have split each witness into a separate video. I encourage people to watch all parts of the analysis so you can appreciate the comments and conclusions I am going to make in the final part. If you don't want to sit through all of the analysis, you could skip straight to part 5, but if you want to come back to me with comments or questions, I ask that you please watch all the analysis first. I believe this new analysis sheds a different light on the case, and I am asking people to consider the new information and, if possible, help fill in some of the blanks. So anyone who has constructive comments, please get in touch. Note that the statement interviews which follow are contaminated from time and repeated telling of the narratives. The interviews may have been edited, and the witnesses are not always speaking in the free editing process. This means the conclusions that can be made are less reliable than if the statements were uncontaminated. The first statement is from Sergeant Jim Penniston, whose account is from the first night.
Well, once I was notified and was dispatched to go off base for a possible aircraft downing, I assembled a team and went approximately about 300 yards off base where we had our encounter with a craft of unknown origin.
The speaker begins with, "Well, once I was notified." This is the element of time. This could be entirely appropriate given the long time between the event and this statement. This is an unexpected phrase. Unfortunately, we don't know what the question was. It sounds like he was waiting for the notification and dispatched, a possible reason for the element of time. This is coupled with the unexpected phrase, approximately about 300 yards off base, where it makes it sound scripted, as he is measuring the distance, then identifying the event, as though it is out of sequence. What is expected is when, time, not where, location. The location is more important to the speaker than time is. Dispatched to go off base for a possible aircraft downing. The speaker tells us he was dispatched go off base. Why does he tell us he was to go off base? This seems contrived, like a drill. The speaker goes from using the pronoun I to we and our. This is appropriate as he is no longer alone. We look for the pronoun I to connect the speaker directly to the event. The speaker has multiple pauses. We note them as possible needs to think about what to say, remembering a script, or innocently his manner of speaking. We look to see if the pattern changes.
What did you see, James?
Well, as we approached the tree line, it was a very bright light emanating from the woods. But as we got a little bit closer, the light started to dissipate, and we could see a silhouette of a craft, the shape of the craft forming.
Starts with well, as though collecting his thoughts. He then has a pause, and stutters on the, plus several more pauses, He then says, it was a very bright light. Why the article it? A mannerism? But refutes or minimizes by comparison what came before. The word but is unnecessary here. Unnecessary words are necessary to the speaker, so analysts take note. But as we got a little bit closer, little bit, both of these words are unnecessary. The light started to dissipate. Does light dissipate? This is sounding scripted. For the group to see a silhouette, the light source would need to be behind the craft. Is the light coming from the craft? The shape of the craft forming. Forming? This sounds scripted.
And as we get up maybe within 10, 15 feet of it, the bright light had dissipated altogether, and there was just lighting of blue and red running through the fabric of the craft.
The bright light had disappeared altogether. Was the bright light supposed to be emanating from the craft? It is implied but not stated, so we cannot state it for the speaker. If not from the craft, then how did they know where the craft was? Disappeared altogether. The addition of the word altogether is unnecessary, as disappeared implies complete. Unnecessary words are only unnecessary to the listener, as they have meaning and importance to the speaker. This indicates sensitivity to the speaker. And there was just a lighting, a blue and red running through the fabric of the craft. Just is a comparative word, so the speaker is comparing the light with at least one other thing in his mind for him to add the word just to the sentence. The speaker stumbles on the article a, repeating it. This can indicate sensitivity. Why does the speaker use the word fabric? He uses an unexpected word for the construction of the craft and does not expand or explain why he calls it fabric, as most aircraft of the time were built of metal. Was the craft a fabric mock-up? Was the episode an exercise? Question, what does the speaker mean by fabric?
Could you see shape at this point?
Oh, it was defined shape. It was triangular in shape. It measured approximately 6.5 feet high by 9 feet on the ground. It was in most of the area of the craft itself was probably about 60 or 70% opaque, black-like fabric of the craft was black-like, more like a glass finish.
The speaker gives a long answer for a yes or no question without saying yes or no. Is the speaker giving a rote answer? More stuttering and pauses in these lines than previous. We need to keep track for consistency of stuttering. The description seems to have triggered more. Why? There is the contamination angle of this story repeated often over years. That should expectedly reduce the stuttering, not increase it. It indicates sensitivity where there should be none. About 60 or 70% opaque, black, like fabric of the craft was black-like. Why use percentage of craft opaque? Why not mostly black or half black? And if around black, what was the other part? Again, the undefined fabric. What is black-like?
I'm not going to ask you about origin yet, James, but you have no doubt that this was a physical structure, right?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. The craft was situated on the forest floor, and it was solid, and it was unmovable.
Another yes or no question. Here the speaker does say no, but with words before and after it. With such questions, the analyst should note the number or quantity of words besides the expected yes or no. The more words, the more sensitive and the more need to persuade. The first sentence is without stutter, but the second has quite a few breaks as he talks about the craft with no direct reference to the interviewer's question. Oh, there was no doubt about that. This is the speaker's answer for yes. There is a distancing element in the language to providing a straight answer, such as yes or no. Yes, I touched it. That also indicates possible distancing from his answer. The speaker mentions location when asked if it was a physical structure. He also calls it solid and unmovable, yet doesn't tell us how he knows it was unmovable.
It left imprints in the ground, which they have the plaster casts of.
That's right, James. The ground temperature at that time, because the next morning was measured or was taken, and it was like 31 degrees. And the depressions were anywhere from about 1.5 to 2 inches in the ground. So it was quite heavy, but light for aircraft standards. It was probably, later on a team had estimated what the weight was based on the ground temperature, and they estimated about 7 tons. And, that's very light for an aircraft, even a fighter aircraft, 25, 30 tons.
The interviewer asks a specific question, and James answers with more technical precision than expected. This may be because he has had lots of time to process the event and hone his account, or it could have been handed to him as part of a program for the military. The story seems to be by rote and not experiential. This could be a result of the time passing and the account revisited many times, so that the speaker refers to his previous answers instead of experiential memory. You know. The speaker uses the term you know where the audience would not know. It is an indication of a need to be heard on the part of the speaker. This could also indicate a sensitivity to the topic. The speaker's mention of temperature and weight seem like what might be given out as part of a program from the military. For a 6 foot by 9 foot fabric craft, 7 tons still seems like a lot in my opinion. How did James calculate the weight? Since plaster casts were made, we are led to believe the weight was calculated from that information. Still, if it was, would James be privy to such analysis? A team passively noted. Passivity is used to conceal identity or responsibility. Here, it may be that the speaker doesn't know more. There is less stuttering on this part than other parts of the statement.
How long did you stay out there, James, witnessing the craft?
I was doing a 360 around the craft, doing my investigation, trying to determine if the craft was hostile.
The interviewer asks James how long time he was witnessing the craft, to which James does not answer. Instead, he relates what he was doing, action. His answer sounds more like a reading of a military report, a rote answer. You know. Again, the use of the phrase you know where the audience would not know. This indicates a sensitivity to the topic. Doing my investigation. My investigation. The use of the pronoun my is somewhat unexpected. James is taking ownership. Is James playing his part in a military exercise?
How close did you get?
I was right at the craft. I was...
oh, my God.
I was right next to it, and, I was actually physically touching it.
Yeah, touching it, yeah.
Yes, Jim, go ahead.
Multiple pauses showing possible sensitivity and or needing time to think. Again, this is unexpected for several reasons. Firstly, I think the person, James, would have told us earlier that he touched the craft, if such a craft existed, and second, that he would say it without stuttering or qualifying it. He was right at the craft, right next to it, and I was physically touching it. too many words have entered his language. The need to persuade is heavy and both diminishes and weakens his claim. James stutters on the pronoun I 4 times before he actually said, "and I was physically touching it." Stuttering on the pronoun I shows sensitivity. Stuttering 4 times shows anxiety over saying he was touching it. The addition of the qualifier physically adds to the sensitivity and his anxiety. We should consider he did not touch an alien craft. Unfortunately, the interviewer interrupts. This is also unexpected as the topic seemed very sensitive and we might have learned more from James on the physical touching of the craft. Was the interviewer trying to change the topic?
So sorry to interrupt, but I just want to emphasize that Jim Pennison wasn't alone. He was actually with John Burroughs and Ed Cabansag. Ed Cabansag wasn't at the actual craft, but he walked out towards the craft with them and then stayed back as he was he was a relay for the radio transmission.
He was the radio relay. Yeah, the actual 2 people around the craft was myself and Airman Burroughs.
Yeah.
But, we also had our whole security contingent, less than 300 yards away, which is another 16 security policemen there.
Less pauses in this part where James talks about a group member who was not at the craft. Near the end of the second sentence, the mention of the other people nearby causes a series of stutters, but refutes or minimises by comparison what came before. Here James brings the crowd to bolster himself, even though it appears these were not near the craft. You know and you know makes several appearances in the dialogue, even though it should be obvious we don't know. Given the questions seem more like prompts to James, maybe the interviewer does know. James feels it necessary to persuade with the qualifier actual 2 people. This shows sensitivity and the possibility of no craft. Actual may be leakage about the craft, as there are many other words James could have used to say there were only 2 of the group near the craft.
Yeah, Burroughs was in D.C. with us this weekend with Linda Moulton Howe, and just they gave great testimony, as you do, James. So when you touched the craft, what did it feel like? Was it hot? Was it cold?
The question is not a good question, and it leads an answer. For statement analysis, open-ended and not compound questions yield the cleanest answers.
The craft was somewhat warm, but you got to remember the temperature outside was 32, 33 degrees, and it felt warm to the touch.
The craft was somewhat warm. This short line has the marks of a reliable sentence, short and clean with only one qualifier, somewhat. It is an answer which parrots the question. Parroting is easy for a subject and lessens the impact of a direct lie. It is less stressful than lying. James goes on with his answer. Since he had already given his answer, all words after show sensitivity to the question. Here the subject goes on qualifying his answer, which lessens its strength, weakening its value as a reliable statement. The addition of the word but, which is used to refute or minimize by comparison what came before. If his earlier sentence was correct, the word but should be unnecessary here. The addition of but you got to remember and you know adds to the sensitivity and weakens the claim. Also, the pauses increase as he goes on. James also reports it was twice, and the pauses and stuttering seem to show a shift in wording indicating self-censoring, and he ends up saying something different than what he started saying. And it felt warm to the touch. The inclusion of the word felt is both unnecessary and redundant. It weakens the statement of claim.
The air around the craft was giving an electrical charge off. If we could feel that on our clothes, our skin, our hair.
Following the pronouns, James goes from the expected I to the unexpected we. This indicates a desire to be in a crowd. Deception does not like to be alone, so often we see a shift in the singular to the plural. While this alone doesn't prove deception, it is a reason for concern for the analyst. We expect the author to tell us what he feels, not what we feel, as it is incongruent to speak for another's feelings. This use of plural then continues with the use of our in our clothes, our skin, our hair. Given the event, witnessing a UFO, an analyst would expect to hear the singular pronoun I with the subject committed to his narrative.
Of course, some of that, might have been a little adrenaline going on there, but it was consistent, and even after I settled down and I determined there was no threat that I could see from this craft.
This sentence is unexpected. It is like an admission that not all is as the narrative says. Some is not explained as to what it entails, and that shows distancing by the speaker of the unidentified some. This indicating closeness, and that indicating distance.
It was sitting there inert. I conducted, a further investigation of it by walking around it, taking my notes, taking pictures going up to it.
When we see human posture given to an inanimate object, we often find that the individual handled the object or placed it in the position mentioned, and when speaking of it, they reveal this by their language. Did James have something to do with it sitting there? James pauses, and then stutters on the pronoun I. There is high sensitivity regarding what he is saying and possible self-censoring. A further investigation. Further to what? Isn't this the beginning as he comes up to the object? Why did he not say continuing investigation? A further investigation. Why did James use the article a further investigation, when the correct article would be the, since the investigation had already begun? Could it be James is following the script of his duties when he was with the military, and this was a military exercise? Taking is repeated, giving it more sensitivity. James also said he was taking pictures. Where is the information regarding the pictures? Note, James does not say walking around the craft, nor does he say taking pictures of the craft. It is stressful to lie outright, so much of deception is in omission of information or obfuscating around the truth with indirect wording.
And then it was on the ground approximately 45 minutes.
Starting with and indicates missing or withheld information. This is followed by then. Then is temporal lacunae, indicating missing time. So combined we have the indication of missing information and missing time. James speaks of the craft being on the ground for 45 minutes. Since he hasn't told us he witnessed the craft arrive, he should speak of his time and not that of the craft. Is this the missing information and jump in time? Did James have more to do with this than he is telling us? And
then it started to generating light throughout the fabric of the craft, and it started to get brighter. And John and I, Aaron Burroughs, we took a defensive position, probably about 25 feet from the craft, and watched it rise up to tree level, hover momentarily, and then take off in a blink of an eye.
Again, James starts the sentence with and then, giving indicators of missing information and missing time, temporal lacunae. James also self-censors, and it appears to change what he was about to say to something else. And then it started to generating the light throughout. Started to, an incomplete action. Started to is repeated as James continues speaking. So the aspects of generating light are both incomplete actions. Is this an attempt to avoid an outright lie? James crowdsources and brings along Aaron Burroughs. We took a defensive position. Analysts like to see the pronoun I as an indication of linguistic commitment, especially in cases where there is high-profile singular events such as this, seeing and touching a UFO. The lack of such commitment weakens the claim.
Without any sound, wake, air disturbance.
There was no sound. There was no air displacement.
James answers the question and adds more than the question asked, as if by rote.
Let me describe something a little bit better with the craft describing it.
All right, James.
Some of the things I was looking for on the craft, obviously, were crew compartments, intakes, exhausts, things of that nature, and it was void of all those. It was a solid surface on it.
After answering the interviewer's question, James elaborates on some aspects of the craft which turn out to be describing nothing. It is as in the case of the negative. James tells us what isn't about it. Things reported in the negative have a higher importance to the speaker and therefore the analyst as well. James does use the pronoun I here for what he was looking for. I would expect to hear what he saw instead of what he was looking for. This makes the account sound like a screenplay and he is playing a part in an exercise. The repeated use of the words "it was" indicates stress on the part of the speaker as well as sensitivity.
And it for the 9 feet long by 6.5 feet high, it was a very small craft. And so I was looking for the crew compartments. I said, well, this has to be a one-seater or something like that. Mm-hmm. But there was just no windows at all. And that's the other odd thing on takeoff. Besides not having the air displacement that you get from engines and noise, I could not determine what the power source was for that.
James states the size again. He had previously said the height and width in the very same words, speaking in rote. Speaking to himself as speaking his thoughts. Communicative language aimed at himself. Is this the speaker trying to bring the audience into his narrative? Does he wish the listener to see his logic? And if so, why? But there was just no windows at all. At all is unnecessary for the sentence to be complete. Unnecessary words are only unnecessary to the listener, as they hold importance to the speaker, or they would not enter his language. This also comes after the speaker uses the word but, which refutes or minimizes by comparison what came before. So the speaker is refuting or minimizing the previous sentence which the speaker made as a communication to self. Is he indicating it was unmanned and he knew so?
So you couldn't see any engines or a hole in the middle of it or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely not. It was completely foreign. I've never seen anything like that.
This is a yes or no question. The answer is neither. The answer is not parroting. The answer is sensitive with the qualifier absolutely and the word not in place of no. The speaker also continues talking. As before, we measure the word count after the word no or not in this case. The more words, the weaker the claim. It was completely foreign. I've never seen anything like that. Completely an unnecessary word weakens the claim. That is a distancing word. For every this, there is a that. Conclusions. This account is unreliable. The speaker does not strongly commit himself linguistically with his own narrative through the use of pronouns. The speaker does not reliably say, I touched the craft. He does not give a good description of the craft. The speaker does more reliably say, he was doing my investigation. In an account of a rare occurrence, there are some expected words and phrases. There is an expectation to hear the pronoun I often and strongly. One expects a detailed description of the event and the craft. None of this is found in this account. The speaker often starts speaking clearly and as he goes on tends to have more and more pauses. This could be self-censoring, something that wouldn't be expected in a first-person account. This may be a normal speech pattern, but we have only this interview to determine. He does show he can make a sentence without a pause. The stuttering and pauses do increase when the speaker is getting close to directly involving himself linguistically while still distancing himself linguistically from the claim. The speaker does not reliably say, I touched the craft. He does not give a good description of the craft. Why might this be unreliable? Could this have been a military exercise and James was a participant? Could he have been sworn to secrecy and there was a craft of unknown origin? The interviewer also interrupted the speaker at possibly the most critical part of the interview. Was he trying to make him stop? Many of his questions reveal he has more knowledge and is guiding the interview.